A couple of weeks back, we took a look at Novamira, which is a new, absolutely free plugin for WordPress that allows you to basically connect up an MCP server, use that on your WordPress website for zero cost, connect that up to Codex or Claude Code or lots of other different tools, and you can use that then to use AI to do a lot of cool things. Simple basic things like creating pages, adding content, stuff like that, right the way up to get it to install things like WooCommerce and create products, all those kinds of cool things. There's so many different things you can do with an MCP server. Well, today we're going to expand upon that. I've had a little bit of time to experiment with Novamira. There've been some updates since my original video, and there's one super cool feature that I want to talk about a little later in this video. So stick around and I'll talk about that later on. But for now, let's go through and take a look at some of the things we can do with Novamira that go beyond what I covered in that initial video, and some things that I think could open up a ton of possibilities and close a gap that I know a lot of people ask about, how you take something from like Claude Code, for example, and bring that into WordPress. I've got a way that you may be able to do that. Again, stick around, we'll talk about that and cover it a little later. But for now, let's just jump over into Novamira, see how we connect things up and have a little bit of fun. Now, once you install Novamira, the first thing you're going to have to do is connect this up to the AI tool that you're using. As you can see, if we come into configuration settings, there's a bunch of different tools we can use, like Claude Code, Claude Desktop, Anti-Gravity, VS Code, and so on. Now, you're not limited to only using these tools, and I know for a fact that more are going to be added in, including Codex. But you can get around this limitation right now if your tool of choice isn't actually covered. What do? Well, you simply copy the settings, for example, like Claude Desktop, create your application password, replace this where it says your app password, copy this into your AI tool of choice, and basically ask it to create that MCP connection. That's exactly what I've done to connect this up right now to Codex until it's natively supported, which apparently is going to be coming either later today or in the next couple of days. Once that's done, make sure you've got enable AI abilities, test your connection, whatever tool you're using, and you're good to go. So for our example today, I'm going to be using Codex, which is ChatGPT's kind of variation on Claude Code. So I've set up the connection. You can see connect WordPress MCP via Novamira. I've gone through exactly what I talked about, and I've also come into this now, asked it, is it connected? And if it is, can you just list off what plugins are actually installed and activated? So now with that enabled, let's start having a little bit of fun. So I've got Bricks installed, and they've opened up more control over connecting this up and using Bricks to do various different things. And I've also got my own custom CSS framework created. So the first thing I want to do is to make sure that it knows that Bricks is there, and also that it knows what variables and classes and so on are being used. So let's ask Codex to check that out. So I just wanted to list off the variables that it has created inside Bricks Builder. So providing this can connect up and see everything, it's going to go and check that out, and it's going to come back with a list of different variables that I've got. So I'm going to say, yes, we're going to allow this to connect and do what it needs to do. So we'll say, yep, let's allow this for this chat, so I don't have to keep doing it every 5 seconds, and we'll click allow. Now I'm doing this on a test site. This is on a production environment. I generally would say if you're going to do anything like this, either have it set up on a testing server or use staging site to be able to test this out, not so much on a live site. And obviously disable the AI functionality inside Novamira when you're finished. Okay, so after a couple of seconds, here are all the Bricks Builder variables found grouped by category. So my spacing, my layouts, my corner radius, and so on. So we can see that that is now finding the variables that we have. So what I can do is I can tell it now for anything I want to do design-wise to use those variables. So after a few seconds, 62 variables in total. So I'm going to tell it now from this point on, make sure you use those variables in any designs that we're going to do. So we're going to tell it to do that from this point on in this conversation. So everything we do, we don't have to keep on telling it, use those variables, use those variables. There we go. Yep, understood. For the rest of this conversation, any Bricks design work I create will use your existing variables for spacing, typography, radius, layout, blah, blah, blah. I'll treat them as the design system instead of inventing new raw values unless it's a specific gap that needed in your call. So if it's not covered, it can't do it. It will either create new variables or add in the irrelevant code. So now we've told it what to do. We know that Bricks is connected up. Let's see if it can actually create a design for us and how it handles that. So I'm going to use a reference, and I'm going to use something from Brixies just because it allows me to kind of have a visual representation of what we want. So let's go for something like this, which we know is going to use like a CSS grid. So this is going to kind of see if the MCP server using Novamira and Codex will see this as a CSS grid and actually implement it. So let's open the larger preview of this up. Let's just screen capture this. We'll copy it, paste that into our conversation. So now we've got a reference. So let's ask it to go and create that hero section on a new page. So there we go. I've said create a new page in WordPress, call it Novamira, and using the attached image, create a hero section using native bricks elements and ensure that the end result is fully responsive. You'll notice that I'm not telling it to use the CSS framework of the variables. I've already told it to do that. So let's see if it will take that on board and do exactly what we ask. So let's just commit that. Let's see what it comes back with. Comes back and tells us I'll use the Novamira bricks page building playbook for this. I'm not sure what it's referring to there. Then create a page, build the hero tree, and keep the styling tied to your existing bricks variables. So it's called two different tools. Bricks workflow is loaded. Next, I'm checking the pages of bricks enabled. Then I'll create the page and build the hero as a bricks element tree rather than raw HTML. In my previous testing, one of the things I found, which I kind of fed back to Giovanni, was that it created the layouts that I wanted, but it just put them all into a HTML block. I had to then tell it not to do that. This is something that apparently it doesn't do inside Elementor, and they will be updating the bricks kind of integration in Novamira to take that on board and not kind of work that way, to actually work with the elements themselves to create what it considers to be a sort of like a bricks workflow tree. In other words, your divs, your sections, your containers, all those kinds of things, which obviously is a much better way of working. So now you can see here, I'm going to build a real responsive hero, not as a flat screenshot. Left side content, calls to action, right side mosaic blocks that mirror the attached layout. The styling will reference your variables like my spacing, my H1, and so on. So providing it does everything we say it should, we should see when we move up into bricks that we'll have a full layout all done inside the various different elements, that we're having the variables used as and when they need to be referenced, and we have a much more flexible layout than just dumping everything in as a HTML sort of block of code. Let's let this finish and take a look. So we're waiting for that to complete. If we jump over into WordPress, you can see it has created the Novamira page. So we have that created. We'll wait for this to finish and see if it actually creates everything with bricks. So you can see after 2 minutes and 55 done, I've created the new WordPress page, Novamira, built the hero section in bricks, blah, blah, blah. Tells you there's the page, there's the link to edit this. I've used the attached image as the layout reference, etc., etc. So it tells us it's done all of that. Now let's go and check to see if there's any errors and how it's actually built everything. Okay, so there's our Novamira page. You can see this is using bricks. You also notice that the meta description has been added in, which is using an external plugin. So it's actually also creating that for us as well, which is quite cool. Let's go and take a look at this then. Let's view this on the front end first of all. As you can see, it's pulled that design in. It's using a design system that I've already set up inside here. So it is using that. And it's referenced those colors, the scaling, and all those kinds of good things, which in itself is pretty cool. You can see we have everything set up on the right-hand side. Now, obviously, there's no images at this point in time, but we'll go back and address that in a moment. But everything we wanted is inside here, including pulling in placeholder text. So jumping into bricks, you can see there's our design layout. As you can see, if we take a look at the structure tree on the right-hand side, it is all set up using sections, containers, headings, rich text, and so on. So all the relevant elements. You may need to do a little bit of refining here, but that depends upon how complex the layout is and exactly what you want. So sometimes you'll get 80-90% of the way there and have to fine tune a little bit. But in general, it's doing a pretty decent job in my experience. But let's take a look. Let's select this title. As you can see, Novamira, H1. So it's using the right things there. If we come into style, come into the CSS, you can see what this has done is it's pulled the variables inside here, which isn't a bad way of doing it, but you may want to change this up. So let's go and take a look at the other heading, for example. And you can see this has done basically the same thing. But you can see it's pulled everything in for us. Now, what we may want to do is tell it to change that, because you'll notice that the HTML sort of symbol or CSS symbol down the right-hand side is telling us that every single one of these has some CSS code applied to it. So, for example, if we select the button, you can see it's not using the options here, but if we come into the CSS, you can see it is in there. Let's address that. Let's say we don't want that to be the case. Let's jump back into Codex and say we want to update that. So I'll take a little screenshot as a reference to kind of give it to Codex so we can just know what we're talking about. So we just copy that from there and copy it, attach that here. And let's see what happens, because I prefer to have these variables inserted in. Not that I can say it's a bad way, it just gives you more flexibility. You don't have to mess about with code where relevant. So let's hit send on that. Let's see what it comes back with and see if it updates it the way that I want. The nice thing with a lot of this, though, is that once you kind of refine how this works, You can tell it how to do this from this point forward, and then this conversation, or whatever you kind of set it to do, should then take that on board. But there is one cool new feature that I want to draw your attention to while we're waiting for this to actually complete. Now, the eagle-eyed among you may have noticed this. Novamira Pro. That's right. There's a Pro version coming out today. It might be released at the time of this video. It may be a little bit later. But Novamira Pro is actually coming out. And there's a couple of cool things that you may want to take into consideration. So inside Novamira, you'll see we've got some more options than we had before. All this looks exactly the same, the sandbox, etc. But we have memory and instructions. Let's open this. And inside here, you can see we can enable memory and custom instructions. These are basically defaults that you want to apply to everything you do inside here. This will be part of Novamira Pro that'll be used in conjunction with whatever AI tool you're using to connect to the MCP server. So this is pretty cool. So where we've gone in and we've said use the CSS variables, etc., you may want to put that directly inside here, and it will be picked up then for every time you connect. So if you leave the conversation, you start a new chat inside whatever tool, or you maybe change from using like Codex to Claude Code or whatever else you want to use. Because this is set up, once you make a connection, this information will be stored alongside it. So you can have memory inside here, you can add custom instructions inside here, which gives you more granular control. Also, with the Pro version of Novamira, from my understanding, it will have better support for Elementor and Bricks, and maybe other tools moving forward like Gutenberg, core blocks, and so on. So while you can connect it with the free version and do some things, you may find you get better results with a larger instruction set by using the Pro version. I'll link to the Pro version and the details on the pricing and everything else down below. This is Giovanni, has sent this information over to me. We've been having a conversation. I've been testing things out, and I asked if I could actually let you know about what is coming in Pro today, and he kindly said, I can let you know. Okay, so jumping back into Codex. Yes, understood, and I've updated the Novamira hero accordingly. Moved the variable-based styling into Brick's native control fields wherever Bricks exposes a relevant setting. Blah, 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 blah. So I'm not going to go through, read all of that. Let's have a look what it's done. Let's take this div section over on the right-hand side, which basically makes up our overall CSS grid. We'll select it, come over, and you can see display as grid. The gap is using my variable space S. You can see we've got our repeat and everything inside here as well. Go down to our divs. Everything's set up the way we want. Come to our background. You can see it's using the variables inside there for colors. Border, if we come into our border, it's using my radius. So it is pulling those variables in for us. You can see now that this is making a lot more sense and should streamline our overall process of working. So connecting it up to Bricks, creating what is basically quite a complex layout is actually relatively straightforward. Now, let's say that we're happy with this, but I don't want to go and select all the images to pop in there. I just want to sort of send a prototype over to a client. So can we use it to do all that kind of boring stuff? Let's have a look. Okay, I'm going to keep this really quite vague and say, now replace the empty placeholder sections on the right with a selection of images from the media library. I'm not going to give it any more instructions just to see how good it is at interpreting what I want, looking at the layout, and then thinking, let's make some decisions over on how we put the images in there. So again, let's just confirm that, let it go and do its thinking and see what it comes back with. And as always, it comes back and tells you what it's going to do. It says, I found a set of media library images that matches the page's web design theme, including Bricks interface, code dashboard, and WordPress workspace imagery. Keep the mosaic grid wrappers and place in native Bricks image elements inside them so the grid stays responsive while the placeholders become real media. Let's see what we get when it finishes doing all this. There we go. After just over a minute and a half, it tells us what it's done, how it's actually positioned those images, etc. So let's go and take a look. Okay, so this is the end result. Now, obviously, we can see there's a little bit of an issue here. And I found this in the previous sort of testing as well, is that it kind of puts the images kind of full inside there. So obviously, that's a bit too big. So what we can do is, let's take a screenshot of this. Like we've done before, let's just do a screen grab. Copy this. Like I say, I was pretty vague when I actually gave it instructions on what to do. Let's go back, paste that in, and tell it to sort that out. Again, I'm going to be pretty vague. Just say the images are far too big, update the design to make the design close to the original design. That's lots of designs. Again, let's just tell it to go and do it. And let's let this do the hard work for us, the heavy lifting, the kind of refinement. Now, obviously, if you spend more time with your prompts and you're very specific about what you want, you probably will find you'll get better results from the get-go. However, if you're quite vague in what you want, you can relatively easily go back and refine those to get exactly the end result that you're looking for, or at least getting you close enough that you can go in there and start tweaking it yourself to get pixel perfect to the end result. So once again, it comes back and tells us exactly what it's done. So let's go and take a look again. There we go, much, much better. So it's put it back to the exact kind of ratios that we had originally. But hopefully this demonstrates how you could use Novamira alongside something like Codex to be able to work inside bricks to create these designs without having to do too much kind of remedial work. How it also sees that you've got variables inside, they use those variables when it makes sense. And if you want to make changes afterwards, you absolutely can do. And because you're using those variables, you can make those site-wide changes super quickly and easily. Now, one of the key questions that always comes up when I release a video on anything like Codex or Claude Code or anything to build kind of website design ideas is how do we take that over into WordPress? And kind of traditionally, that's not very easy to do. It has always been a case of use that as a design and then moving it over kind of involves probably some manual work. So I kind of thought, well, could we actually take that one step further? Sure, you get the HTML code and you could just insert a HTML block widget, whatever, and just drop the HTML code in there and it will build the design out from there. That's one way of doing it, but I think that's a really, it lacks any elegance or the ability to update it afterwards. I want something that I can design, create that HTML and bring that into something like bricks and still be able to work and edit. So I wanted to find out, could we do that with Novamira and the MCP server connected up to Codex? The simple answer is you absolutely can do. So I designed a page inside Claude Code, got it to where I wanted it, and then grabbed the HTML code that generates, pull that into Novamira and ask that to convert that design into bricks native elements. That's what it did. I also asked it that if it found variables or classes that weren't included to create them, but if it found classes that were relevant, use those classes, which again, it did do. Would I need some remedial work and is it perfect? No, it's not. And you probably would have to do a little bit of work. But this is the result. Now, this is a very complex page. There are still things that would need to be updated. There's JavaScript that I told it not to bother including. So there are some things that I could do to make this better. But this is what we ended up with, simply from grabbing that HTML and a screenshot of the end result. I didn't tell it to do sticky down the side, and from the screenshot, it did know it. It's just grabbed that from the HTML code. It's inserted images in, it's created these little sort of callouts, it's styled everything up. You can see each of these callouts. You can see it's got a code block. We can copy that. Obviously, this is a JS kind of feature, so it's not going to work here, but you could easily update it. There's my kind of grid, which again has a few issues because it's an animated JS thing. So again, you would have to rectify that. But you can see there's a ton of styling and functions and background images. And you can see we've got these little sort of code blocks have been styled. So all these different things have been pulled in, including these tags. It brought the footer in. If we scroll back up to the top, you can see we've got these little sort of pills. All of this was done without me actually doing anything other than just dumping the HTML code in. If we look inside bricks, take a look down the right-hand side, the structure panel. You can see it's using all native elements. There's a huge amount going on here, but this gets you so close to what you actually want as an end result. Like I say, this is a very complex layout, and I wanted to sort of just like throw everything, including the kitchen sink, at it to see what it would come back with. It asked me, do I want to install the images and grab those? It grabbed all the images, added those to my media library, created the classes, built the page out, added functionality, used the element structure panel, and so on. So while this is still relatively new, and I'm sure it will get better, so the simple fact that you can take a design that you created, something like Codex, grab the HTML code, pop that into Novamira or Codex or Claude AI, whatever it is you're kind of using to connect things up, and then get that to build this out inside bricks for you, I think is pretty powerful. It kind of fills that missing link that we've kind of had between using design tools and actually getting that into a full potential build inside the likes of bricks. Is it perfect? No, it's not. But this is kind of very early, and I think it's a glimpse into what we will be able to do as we start to get more functionality and easier and better connections between these different tools. But as always, I want to pass the question over to you. What do you think of what I've covered in this video? Has this got you excited about what you could do using Novamira and tools like Claude Code and Codex and so on to connect everything up to your WordPress website, connect it to Bricks or Elementor or native Gutenberg blocks, and be able to kind of do things like this? I think this is a really cool way forward, and I'm excited to see how this will grow and develop over the next couple of months. But like I say, let me have your comments and feedback down in the comment section down below. Have you tried out Novamira? Have you connected things up, and have you tried this process yourself? Or has this opened your eyes to what you could achieve? As always, all applicable links are in the description down below. My name is Paul C. This is WPTuts, and until next time, take care.